G'day and namaste and welcome to Is It Art, a new series that I'm starting here on my ARTvsLIFE channel. My name is Pheelix, and in this series I'm going to explore a few different ideas and concepts around what is an artwork, what constitutes an artwork, and possibly expose some artworks that have been lost to history, or in a lot of ways just highlight artworks that you may not have ever considered to be artworks and rationalize why I think they're artworks, because I'd also like to not only show artworks through these series, but also ask a series of questions in the series, if you will, about what is art, what is the purpose of art, and what do we actually define as art, just so that we can broaden out our concepts collectively about what is an artwork and its effect on the world. In my first episode, I explored the idea of this small graphic that was shown during the moon landing to be one of the most profound and interesting and possibly most seen artworks of all time. Basically, the reason why I think that's a really profound artwork is because of the viewership. There was a large audience absolutely mesmerized by that tiny little graphic. And even though it wasn't a very interesting picture, it was one of the most seen pictures of all time. And anyone who saw it live at the time remembers it very, very clearly. So for me, that makes it a very profound and interesting artwork. And today I'd like to talk about another profound and interesting artwork, which is arguably not a standalone artwork in itself, but it's what has become to known collectively as Operation Fortitude during World War II. Now, there are many great documentaries about Operation Fortitude. I will leave some links in the low bar or in the description below, so please check them out if you're at all interested in this subject, because it is quite big and way too extensive for a short 5-minute video that I'm going to do today about the art aspect of it. However, I'll just go over it in brief in case you don't know anything about it. Basically, during the Second World War, the Germans, once they'd occupied France, were sure that at some point an army would come from England and land on France's shore. It was just inevitable. Unless the Germans could take over the UK, there was absolutely no way that they could prevent an army landing either in Norway, in Germany itself, along the Danish coast, in Belgium, or in France. It was just bound to happen at some point. So what happened was that the Allies got together, that being the UK or the British, the Americans, Australians, Canadians, anyone who was on the Allied side, we all got together and developed this operation to basically fake out the Nazis and to pretend that we had a huge army in one place when we actually had the army in another. The army that actually landed is what we now know as the D-Day landings on Normandy beaches, and Operation Fortitude was basically a huge fake out which allowed the Normandy beach landings to take place without the Germans actually knowing in advance that that's where the Allies were going to strike. Now, there are many aspects to this story, and I won't go into too many of them. Suffice it to say that there was many hundreds of thousands of people involved in it, but yet it was actually maintained as a secret. There was many airmen involved who dropped fake parachuters and little tinfoil strips to fake out the radar. There were seamen involved who had fake landing ships and did fake patrols. There was spies and different operatives in place who were making radio chatter and pretending to do different sorts of paperwork. But I won't go into details about all that. What I'm interested in is the fact that they actually built a fake army. Now, how did they do this and what makes this art? Well, not too many details remain of the actual people who constructed the fake army in of itself. Not that I've been able to find, and I'll definitely do some more research into this subject because I'm fascinated by it. But at some point, maybe for 6 months, maybe years even, a group of artists, engineers, tradespeople, carpenters would have all come together and designed a way to pretend that there was an army sitting in one place when there was actually the real army in another. Now, of course, they would have been restricted by the usage of materials. It would have to be as cheap as possible, but it would also have to be as effective as possible. They did this. So a group of 100, maybe thousands of people, men and women, would have gotten together and they made blow-up tanks that were inflatable. They made fake aeroplanes out of balsa wood and other different cheaper materials. They painted them. They also did all the fake paperwork to keep this stuff secret. Obviously, the Nazis would have twigged that something was going on if you're ordering 10,000 litres of army green paint to a aeroplane workshop or something like that. So they did all this operation in secret, not telling anybody about it. And for me, this is a really interesting gig as an artist. I mean, all sorts of interesting things come up from time to time when you work in the arts or creative industries. And this would have been one very interesting gig because you wouldn't have been able to tell anybody about it. You would have just been working on this in secret and producing thousands and thousands of fake planes, jeeps, all sorts of things, fake radio signals, fake aeroplanes, absolutely everything. Now, these mock models weren't greatly detailed, but they didn't have to be, because in the end, the audience that it was designed for was the German counterintelligence and for Hitler himself. Now, getting back to the idea of the audience making the artwork, this artwork was really just intended, and especially the football field's worth of actual military hardware that they pretended to make, was intended really just to be seen in photographs. So it wasn't very detailed, but it was a very effective way of doing it because the Germans did fly over, they did take photographs, those photographs went back to the High Command and allowed the Allies to have a very successful invasion on D-Day. So in this sense, this entire artwork was actually built for literally a few handfuls of people. A few German pilots who took the photographs, a few German spies who would have looked at the operation and thought that there was an army there, and only Hitler himself and his inner circle of military advisors would have actually seen these photographs and actually seen the artwork. So as to opposed to our first artwork that had a huge audience, this is a huge artwork that had a tiny intended audience of only Hitler and a few generals. So this is the complete opposite end of that spectrum as far as what makes an artwork and what constitutes a piece of art. So that's it for today. I hope you're going to enjoy this series. I'm going to be doing plenty of these little documentaries on is it art and trying to figure out what actually artwork is. I'm not sure what the next one's going to be, but I'd like to do one on animal painting as well. I think that'd be really interesting to ask whether that's art or not. So please do the do. Like, subscribe and share around to anyone you think might be interested in this subject matter, and I'll catch you in the next way.